Have you ever looked at your parents and thought they handled life so differently than we do today? Not perfect, not easy, but somehow more stable, more certain. And then you look at parents today, maybe even yourself, and there's more thinking, more stress, more emotion, more pressure. And a quiet question starts forming in your mind. What changed? Because deep down, it doesn't just feel like parenting evolved. It feels like something inside people changed. And the truth is, it did. Not because people became weaker, not because they stopped caring, but because the world around them changed faster than the human mind could keep up with. Let me show you what's really going on. Imagine two parents, one from 20 or 30 years ago, and one from today. Both care deeply about their child. Both want to do the right thing. But the world they're responding to is completely different. The older parent lived in a world with fewer voices, fewer opinions, fewer constant inputs telling them what they should or shouldn't do. Their decisions came from a smaller circle, family, culture, and personal experience. Now compare that to today. A modern parent wakes up, and before they've even had their first cup of coffee, they've already been exposed to dozens of ideas about parenting. Social media posts, expert advice, parenting blogs, viral videos, contradicting opinions. One voice says, "Be gentle." Another says, "Be firm." One says, "Don't say no too much." Another says, "Kids need structure." And suddenly, something that used to feel natural starts to feel complicated. This is where psychology introduces a concept called decision fatigue. When your brain is forced to constantly evaluate too many choices, it doesn't become sharper, it becomes tired. And a tired brain doesn't make calm, confident decisions. It becomes reactive, uncertain, and sometimes overwhelmed. So when you see parents today hesitating more, questioning themselves more, or even overthinking small situations, it's not because they're less capable. It's because they're carrying a heavier mental load. Now let's go deeper. Think about how emotions were handled in older generations. There was a kind of emotional simplicity. Not necessarily because emotions were simple, but because they weren't analyzed as much. People didn't pause to dissect every feeling. They moved through life with a mindset of endurance. If something was difficult, you pushed through it. If something hurt, you kept going. That created resilience, a kind of psychological toughness. But it also came with a cost. Emotions were often suppressed. Conversations about mental health were rare. And many people grew up not fully understanding what they felt, only that they had to control it. Now look at today's parents. They've grown up in a world that encourages emotional awareness. Talking about feelings is normal. Therapy is more accepted. Understanding your inner world is seen as strength, not weakness. And that's a powerful shift. But here's the paradox. When you become more aware of your emotions, you don't just gain clarity, you also gain sensitivity. You notice more. You feel more. You process more. And sometimes, you carry more. So when a parent today reacts emotionally, or seems overwhelmed by something that might have been brushed off in the past, it's not necessarily a lack of strength. It's the result of deeper awareness. And awareness changes behavior. Now let's bring in another layer, comparison. Older parents compared themselves to a small, familiar group. Maybe a few neighbors, relatives, or friends. Today's parents are comparing themselves to an endless stream of curated perfection. Perfect routines. Perfect kids. Perfect homes. And even if they know it's not real, their brain still responds to it. Psychologically, this creates something called perceived inadequacy, the feeling that you're falling short, even when you're doing fine. And that feeling quietly shapes behavior. It makes people try harder. It makes them second-guess decisions. It makes them more cautious, more anxious, and sometimes, more controlling. So when you see parents today being more involved, more protective, or even more stressed, you're seeing the effect of constant comparison. Now here's something interesting. Older generations were raised in environments that prioritized survival and stability. Today's generation is navigating a world that prioritizes self-expression and understanding. Those two environments produce very different psychological patterns. Survival builds discipline, structure, and consistency. Self-expression builds awareness, creativity, and emotional depth. Neither is better. They're just different responses to different worlds. And parenting reflects that. That's why older parents might seem more grounded, more consistent, more predictable. And today's parents might seem more expressive, more flexible, but also more emotionally complex. It's not a decline. It's a shift. Now think about this. If you were raised in a world where mistakes had clear consequences, you'd learn to be cautious, structured, focused. But if you're raising a child in a world full of uncertainty, rapid change, and constant information, your focus naturally shifts. You start asking different questions. Not just, what should my child do? But, how will this affect them emotionally? How will this shape who they become? And those questions change how you respond. They make parenting more intentional. But they also make it more mentally demanding. And that demand shows up as stress. Now here's the part most people overlook. Every generation doesn't just raise the next one. It reacts to the one before it. If older generations were too strict, the next generation becomes more flexible. If emotions were ignored, the next generation prioritizes them. If structure was overwhelming, the next generation tries to soften it. And in that process, balance is constantly shifting. That's why parenting never stays the same. It's always adjusting, always evolving. And maybe the real question isn't, why have parents changed? Maybe it's, what are they changing in response to? Because when you look at it that way, things start to make more sense. Now let's bring this back to you. Because whether you're a parent, or just someone observing these changes, you've probably felt this difference in real life. That subtle moment where something feels unfamiliar. Where you think, this isn't how it used to be. And you're right. But different doesn't mean wrong. It means the human mind is doing what it's always done, adapting. Trying to survive in a new kind of world. Trying to understand more, feel more, and maybe do better. And maybe the real strength doesn't lie in choosing one style over another. Maybe it lies in combining them. Taking the stability of the past and the awareness of the present. The discipline of older generations and the emotional intelligence of today. Because that balance, that's where growth happens. So the next time you notice how different parents feel today, instead of judging it, get curious about it. Because behind that difference is a story about how people adapt, evolve, and try to make sense of a world that never stops changing. And if this made you reflect on your own experiences, your own family, or even your own mindset, take a moment with that. Because sometimes, understanding these patterns doesn't just change how you see others. It changes how you see yourself. And once you start seeing that clearly, you start responding differently too. And if you want more videos that explore human behavior in a way that actually connects to real life, you already know what to do. Stay curious.